Morning everyone, I'm Nathan, Employment Taxes Director. Hopefully everyone's enjoyed their coffee break. For the next 20 minutes I'm going to talk to you about some of the hot topics within employment taxes and also some of the risk areas. Before I get started, it'd be helpful if you could kind of give me like a nod or a shake to know whether you have any sort of interaction with employment taxes, and that will kind of impact on how I interact and work and pitch it. So before I get started, can you give me a quick nod or a shake if you have any sort of interaction with employment taxes at work at all? Perfect, excellent. Okay. A few things I wanted to cover in our session this morning. So one is national minimum wage and a few facts and tips. That pretty much affects everyone throughout England. I thought that would be just a good one to provide an update on, because HMRC have been really active in making sure that employers across the country are paying workers the correct amounts. I also wanted to touch on the employee end of year forms. I'm already aware that the deadline passed a few months ago, so hopefully everyone is up to date as far as you're aware. But I thought there's a few things in there that I wanted to mention. And then finally, I thought it'd be handy if I kind of gave you a free tax tip, just to confirm this is not tax advice in any capacity, but ways that you can either get yourself a bit of tax back or even any of your colleagues or workers. As I go through, if you have any questions, do let me know. Happy to hear you out now, or at the end of the session I'll be around to pick up on any questions. So I wanted to start off first with national minimum wage. And it's a weird one because NMW, you kind of always tend to hear about it quite a lot, that businesses are getting it wrong. And it's not always clear like how is it even possible. Because surely it's a simple case of making sure that you pay your people correctly, above the NMW, and everything's fine. But unfortunately, it's not that easy. So in June this year, HMRC released a report and they named and shamed about 200 employers which somehow they've paid their workers the incorrect amount and they were underpaid. So in total, that came to £5 million. And then, unfortunately, they faced penalties of £7 million, which is even higher than what they owed. So what I wanted to kind of talk through is how those breaches sorts of happen, and so hopefully kind of bring it to life a bit. So when I was 17, when I was 17 a few years ago, I know you're trying to do the maths to find out how young I am. I used to work in retail in the Boring, and so you sell trainers, sell clothes, and I was paid £3.30 an hour. And so what you did was you kind of go in, you pay, you work, and then you leave. Fine. Have like a rota, get paid, then you leave. But what they didn't do is they didn't pay me when I had to show up early for my shift. They didn't pay me when I was searched for my lunch breaks, and they also didn't pay me when you tidied the store ahead of the next day. And those sorts of little things, even though it's like 10 minutes here or there, that's exactly how these breaches sorts of happen. So that's kind of like a retail, which is quite an easy example. But even if you bring it forward to a professional capacity, so for example, accountancy firm, when you are a student, do long hours, you work in, but you're paid based on the salary that you agree with your employer. And over a period of time, you can quite easily breach national minimum wage by getting your salary, but working loads and loads of hours and simply not being paid for it. And that's the sort of reasons why HMRC have been active and employers get caught breaching national minimum wage. Another key one is any salary sacrifice schemes. Yeah. Salary sacrifice, you agree with your business or your employer to reduce your salary in exchange for a benefit. Win-win on both sides. And unfortunately, even if an employee has agreed to a reduced salary, again, that can still put them below national minimum wage. So if you let's say you bring it all together, so you have salary sacrifice schemes maybe, you're working long hours, not getting paid for it, that's how HMRC kind of catch employers out.
Just on that.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, would you like our box that we can?
Not really.
No. Go for it.
Just quickly. So, I've got some very dedicated employees.
Okay.
Who, even if I've not asked them to do any overtime, I might find still loitering about in the office doing work or doing other bits of cleaning. I've in theory fallen foul of national living wage.
What are they actually doing when they're?
So, good example might be, she stopped doing this now, but my finance manager previously was very dedicated. She might have done some really long hours, not claimed an overtime for that.
Yeah.
I've not asked her to do that, and my predecessor's not asked her to do that. But have we done it inadvertently? Or, would HMRC take a view on that?
Potentially, I suppose what the position HMRC would take is how, as a business, how do you kind of support employees to make sure they're aware that they're not required to work the extra hours. I think as long as you've kind of been clear in how you communicated to them.
Well, I mean, I told her she has to have a life.
Yeah. Well, clearly she does work. But yeah, I think it's more about communication and making sure that you're not in some way facilitating it. Then.
Yeah, it wasn't kind of expected.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Excellent. Final point on this one is HMRC have they produce a checklist of 18 points, which is kind of like a tip to make sure that employers don't, unfortunately, pay less than NMW. Any questions on NMW before I move on? Excellent. Next one is employer end of year forms, and this one, like a really brief update. Does anyone in the room get involved in preparing forms P11Ds at all? Yeah, a couple of months. Okay. So the little change on this one is, so in the past you had to submit the forms online electronically, and then any amendments you could actually post to HMRC. Unfortunately, from 22-23 tax year, it's just ended. HMRC will no longer accept any amendments in the post. So you have to do any changes online on HMRC's website. I've done quite a few personally, and it's not an enjoyable experience. If you can imagine HMRC producing something that kind of gives as much information as possible and you don't pay for it, it's not going to be helpful. So my one tip is, if you can, make sure as much as possible that when you put the forms in, that they're perfect. And if you do send them in the post, they'll just send them back in reject. Next one is a pay-as-you-earn settlement agreement, which is an agreement with HMRC and the business. The main tip on this one is to make sure that you have an agreement in place with HMRC before when you provide any taxable expenses. Does anyone in the room actually get involved in this sort of agreement with HMRC? No, nice. Cool. So with PSA, which is short for it, typically I would say this is when, if the business provides some sort of expense or benefit which is taxable, but it'd be quite unfair to get the employee to pay the tax, then the business can agree with HMRC that the business will pay the tax on their behalf. I think a classic example would be, let's say it's an employee's special birthday, you wanted to reward them and you bought them a gift for £100. Clearly it'd be unfortunate if you then said, happy birthday, by the way, you're going to get taxed on it in about 12 months' time. So those sorts of examples are where you can agree with HMRC to cover the tax on the employee's behalf. It's a bit more expensive, but it's more to make it easier on the employee, and then HMRC get their tax. Couple of deadlines on that one is, if you want it to be in place, it needs to be in place by the 5th of July, following the end of the tax year, when you might have given some taxable gifts. So, part of the session you were waiting for was how can you get free tax back? So as an employee, you go to work and you get paid, but sometimes you might pay for things that your employer hasn't reimbursed you for. And there's a short list, but the list can be quite extensive, of when you paid for something you didn't get reimbursed, so you can write to HMRC and ask them to give you some tax back. So me personally, fortunately, Parry pay for my professional subscriptions, so I can't claim it back. But say Parry didn't do that, I pay for my professional qualification, I could write to HMRC and say, well actually I paid for this, it's for work, can you give me some tax back? And by the way, I paid for it for the last 4 years, so then I'll extrapolate that over 4 years. Anyone in this room pay for their own qualification and it doesn't get reimbursed by the business at all? Oh, seeing them out there? Got some tax back there? Ah, perfect, excellent. And other common ones are where, let's say you travel for business and you don't get reimbursed the 45 pence per mile. Again, that's quite a good one that can get quite sizable. You can write to HMRC and say, well actually, I drove 100 miles for work, they only reimburse me 20p. Can you reimburse me the difference? Then you get some tax back. Other ones as well are uniforms and work clothing, where if, let's say, your colleagues wear a uniform and they have to wash it themselves, again, they can do the same thing and go back 4 tax years. Another one that you might have heard about is when we had the lockdowns was the use of home allowance. So that's probably the more well-known ones, but the rules since then have gone quite tightened. So you can only claim that now if you're actually required to work from home, and then you can write to HMRC. But the rules around that are much more strict, unfortunately. These ones are much more easy. And the last part I wanted to mention on this is you can actually pay an agent to do this for you, but they're really expensive, and all they're doing is taking your cut of your tax on HMRC. So if you were going to look into doing this, I would go on the HMRC's website, and you can pretty much do it yourself. But just to confirm, this was not tax advice. I'm just pointing you to the HMRC website.
Nathan, do you do that online, or is it just literally writing to HMRC?
Yeah, good question. So Andy's question was, do you do this online, or do you have to write to them in the post? You can do both. My recommendation would do it online. You can log into your personal tax account, follow the instructions through, tell HMRC where you'd like the refund to be paid to, and you can do it in about 10-15 minutes. So yeah, so you can do that online.
I was just asking for a friend.
We'll talk about it. Any other questions on this at all?
Got any magic advice as to how you reduce your tax liability on the paid child benefit back?
On which benefit, sorry?
Child benefit.
The high income child benefit charge?
Yeah, any advice for like just reducing that?
The only way you can
charity giving's quite a good one.
Yeah, so ideally you kind of want to do anything that will reduce your income to below 50,000 when it kicks in. Yeah, it's a difficult one. Just get paid less.
It's not me. We've changed his car to an EV. That's how.
Ah, perfect. Yeah. Or salary sacrifice schemes. Anything that will reduce your taxable pay. That'd be quite helpful. Excellent. But yeah, any questions? I'll be around. But yeah, thanks for your time, everyone.